Welcome back to Family Twist. I'm Corey.
And I'm Kendall. And if you're listening to this when it drops, you're right in the middle of the holidays.
Which is not something we planned when we recorded this conversation with Marylee, but as often happens on this podcast, the timing turned out to matter more than we expected.
In part one, Marylee shared her adoption story and the moment she learned the truth about her birth parents at 15 and a half. In part two, we follow her into what came next, the search, the reunion, and something neither of us knew was coming.
A holiday twist.
Marylee walks us through finding her birth mother in a time before DNA testing, through microfilm, legal notices, carefully written scripts, and then eventually finding the son she was forced to surrender as a teenager.
And what unfolds is not just a reunion story, it's a story about time, about patience, about putting in the work to build real family history after years of separation.
We know this season can be complicated for a lot of people listening, for adoptees, for people with DNA surprises, for anyone who sees photos online of gatherings they're not part of.
Marylee's story does not erase that pain, but it does remind us that sometimes healing shows up later. Sometimes it shows up quietly, and sometimes it shows up around a crowded kitchen table you never thought you would get to sit at.
Here's part two of our conversation with Marylee.
Anyway.
Wow. So what were the circumstances of your son's birth, and was it automatically going to be a closed adoption, or how did that all work out?
All adoptions were closed. There were no open adoptions in 1961. Absolutely not.
Mm-hmm.
And I was, one of the questions that comes up in the minds of legislators who in some states seem to resist the idea that adoptees have a right to their original birth certificates is that birth mothers somehow signed a form promising them confidentiality. No, that form did not promise them confidentiality. That form said, you will have absolutely no right to know anything about your child in the future. It's not about confidentiality. It's about making sure that you're not going to go interfere in the adoptive family's life. So it was to protect the adoptive family, not to protect the birth mother. But it makes it extremely difficult for people who are curious or just want to know their origins. Without that original birth certificate, they have to jump through a lot of hoops. And when you asked about my birth mother, what did I think about finding her? After my mom died, I thought, okay, now I can do it without the kind of guilt that initially came up for me.
And what year was this?
I was 30 years old. Let's just go into my 20s for a second. My husband went to West Point. I went to Vassar. I got pregnant the first semester I was at Vassar. We came back to California, finished our college at Stanford, and had 4 more children. By the time I was 25, I had gotten pregnant with my 5th child. I was 6 weeks pregnant when my husband was killed in a car accident.
Oh, my goodness.
In Germany.
Mm-hmm.
And he was a scientist. He had his PhD in engineering from Stanford. And so I was in California pregnant with all these little stair-step kids. And so I wasn't really in a position to look for my mother. I was just really trying to put my head above water. But by the time I was 30, which is not that many years later, I found out about an adoption group and said, okay, I really need to know more about my identity because I have a son out there. And I know that when he turns 21, I'm going to find him. So I need to know how to do this. One thing that might be interesting to know is that in the old days before DNA tests, if you wanted to find somebody, you had to look in the chattel sales section of the yellow pages of the newspaper, which is in the advertise. It's in the little tiny print, chattel sales, as in cattle, meaning property. It's from Old English law that adoptions are a transfer of property. So they are transferred and they appear as a legal notice in the property sales section of the newspaper. Microfilm became my friend, and I went through probably 60 newspapers in Los Angeles looking for an adoption around the time of my birth. And I found in the Culver City newspaper, I found something that seemed like it would be a match. My adoptive mother had written down a name, and it was Mary Catherine Kirkpatrick, and the other one was Mary Elizabeth Boynton. And I guessed that that was my birth name and my mother's name. And it turned out to be the case.
Wow.
So when I found Kirkpatrick in the chattel sales, I thought that's probably who it is.
Oh.
And then my grandmother, my birth grandmother, was still living in the same house in Culver City. And I called her and I said, I'm looking for Mary Catherine. I'm an old friend of hers from high school. Would you happen to have her phone number? And she did, gave it to me. She was kind of suspicious, but then I called my mom. And by that time, it was a woman in Phoenix who was kind of advising me on steps to take. And she said, it's a good idea to call and to have this particular script written down that you can say as you're making that call and say, hello, my name is blah, blah, blah. And I was born on such and such a date. And I believe that you are my mother. And then before that, to also say, when you call, could you please take down my name and phone number in case we get cut off? And that's if the person faints, falls on the floor, you want them to be able to call you back.
Right.
So my mom was pretty shocked to hear from me. But she did eventually introduce me to my siblings. I went out there. I met her. I'm very much like her. Our voices are identical. And for the first time in my life, I saw people in the mirror who were like me. My brother, my sisters, my 3 sisters. You know, they're so much like me. It's incredible.
Oh,
I love it.
and I imagine just not only the shock of hearing from you, but then, meeting you a couple months later and then meeting your 5 grandchildren.
Yes. That was much, my mom was still operating under the whole burden of shame that she felt from having surrendered me and also from having gotten pregnant. I mean, she was put in a home with nuns. And you can imagine what that would have been like. It was probably 10 times worse.
Yeah.
And I'm not a person who believes in shame. I think I've kind of shed shame like an old snakeskin. I don't think it's a helpful emotion to walk around feeling shame by our actions. We are who we are. We're all people. So anyway, 2 of my sisters are living up here in the Bay Area now. My brother lives in the Bay Area. I see them all the time. My other sister, with whom I'm very close, lives down in Culver City still in my grandmother's house.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, I have a really good relationship. It's been really very positive in my life.
Wow.
At what point did you tell your birth mother that you also got pregnant at 15 and a half and had to give up a child?
I think probably in our first conversation. Yeah, she didn't.
Did she encourage you to look for him?
No, she didn't. She didn't. He was only, when I found her, he would have been maybe 15 or so. And I think, she really wanted to keep me secret. I went to a family wedding, my youngest sister's wedding, when my mother introduced me as a family friend from Illinois. And where I sat in the back of the church holding my sister's twins, while the rest of them were all up there as bridesmaids. She didn't want any of her friends to know I existed.
Wow.
How did your siblings feel about that?
Each of them had a different reaction, different response to that. initially, I think they felt like, I mean, they were really happy to meet me. There was no problem between me and my siblings, but they were kind of angry that they hadn't known about me and that my mom kind of sprang me on them suddenly, like in the middle of their workday. Like, oh, I'm bringing over somebody to meet you. And they're in the middle of their workday. And all of a sudden, there's this person who shows up, the missing sister. I think the fact that she felt so conflicted about this. You know, one thing that happens is that you feel this rush, this bond with people, but you don't have a common history. And so my mom didn't know what to do with that. She would say to me things like, I don't feel about you the way I feel about my other kids. And yet, when I wasn't there, all the time she'd be bragging about Marylee works for Sunset Magazine. Marylee works, writes for Better Homes and Gardens. Marylee went to Stanford. Marylee did this and that. And so they would feel this new person's getting all this attention. But on the other hand, what I was feeling was these direct statements from her. She wrote me a letter saying, I would rather take a long walk off a short pier than tell anyone you exist.
Wow. I mean, no one wants to read that.
Right.
Because you've gotten it from two sets of parents, like the dirty little secret.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. That's what I suspect my birth mother feels as well. But I admire the fact that you don't seem that angry about it. I get it was a completely different era, right?
Yeah.
When she was living through what she was living through. And I try to give people grace because of that. But at the same time, just like it feels so personal, when you're told that.
Yeah.
It's like, I think 8 years in, I'm still struggling with that.
Yeah. Well, my mother is dead, so I'm not struggling with it anymore. We can forgive people at a certain point when they're not around to say more hurtful things to us.
Right.
No, it's true. It's true.
Something popped into my head a few minutes ago, and I hope, and I mean this as a compliment, not an insult at all, but Marylee, you're a tough cookie. So, I mean, just to everything you've told us so far, like to come through that, and then, to have 5 children under the age of 10, meeting the birth side of, your mother's side, and I don't even know where you would have time to start looking for your son.
Right. Well, I eventually did have time to look for him. And of course, it's very hard as a birth parent you have no records at all. And I actually ended up hiring a searcher and paying a lot of money. I don't know what this person did, but he found, I went up to Seattle. I knew he was raised. The Children's Home Society gave me non-identified information. I knew he had graduated from college in the Northwest. He had been raised in the Northwest. I went up to Seattle to look for him, but it turned out he had skipped a grade. So I looked through numerous yearbooks, looking for his yearbook picture. Well, it turned out he was already in college by that time. Super smart guy. He was valedictorian of his college class.
Wow.
He later went on to become head of Microsoft Asia. Now he's 63 and he's completely integrated into the family. When I found him, he was 21. He flew back to Urbana, Illinois, where we were living. He met his 4 full biological siblings. I have 1 daughter and 4 boys. So the boys were all horsing around on the floor like puppies, comparing the lengths of their toes, comparing their hair on the back of their hands, John was up in the attic looking at my old report cards from grade school. Cooking, massive cooking. It was freezing cold winter when he came. We had this big wood stove. I had restored a Victorian house, and that's where we were living. Like one of the big San Francisco Victorians.
Oh, wow.
And anyway, we just had a great, great Christmas. And having learned from my mother, my reunion with my mother, I decided that one of the things, if you're adopted, you have this genetic link. But if you don't put the time in to create history, mutual history, you will never have the kind of rich memories and family lore that is a strength in a family and that binds people together. So in the case of my son, we all made time for him, and he made time for us.
That's so wonderful.
I was really scared to ask because you didn't let us know ahead of time if there was a reunion. Kendall and I were even talking about this yesterday. I knew we would get to that part of the conversation, but boy, was I scared.
Yeah.
And we've said this many times, we like to not know too much of your story before we start talking. I feel
that being said, though, we have to sort of ask questions in a very gentle manner because we don't want to, upset our guests, unintentionally. But, we also want to know the story too.
Yeah.
But we're also very respectful when people want to keep certain things out of it, especially names and things like that. Like that is
right.
We're not gotcha journalism. We're trying to help people, But it warms our heart to hear that you've been in reunion and had amazing circumstances, because not everybody ends up with the family, like you did, like you have.
Yeah.
How many grandchildren do you have?
12 and one great-grandchild.
Oh,
wow.
Goodness.
Congratulations. That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's amazing. What are the holidays for you these days?
Well, the holidays,
we're approaching
at Christmas, we rent a house together. The house has to keep getting larger and larger. So we spend the entire Christmas holiday in one house. My kids all live around the country. So this is our one time when we all get together. And we've done it for years and years. The first Christmas that John was with us was when he was 21 and now he's 63. I've known him longer than I didn't know him, which is
right.
That's beautiful.
Great.
I love it.
And for him to see people that look like him and sound like him and whose handwriting is like his. I mean, even in the smallest way, he does things with the kids. Like he goes on golfing trips with one of my sons who's a big golfer. One of my other sons went over and visited him in Malaysia when he was head of Microsoft Malaysia for about a month. So they went around China together. He speaks Chinese. This is before China really even opened up. So my son and daughter went over and visited him, and then they rode the Iron Rooster around China. So they've had a lot of experiences together. Like I said, he's been fully integrated into the family.
Yeah. That's incredible. Yeah. We've only been doing this, I think, for about a year now. But the final question that we've been asking guests on this podcast, and you probably haven't heard it if you've just been listening to the early episodes, is that when you were really going through the tough times, maybe it was when you were in the home for unwed mothers, or maybe it was when you were in the library looking through the microfiche, or maybe it's when you get together with all of your children and grandchildren for the holidays. Is there a song or a musical artist that really jumps out at you, means something special to you?
Do you know, I can't think of anything like holiday songs. I mean, Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, I don't know. But
that's a good one.
But I think the song that it kind of, when I think about how he was conceived, there's a song that the first cut is the deepest.
Yeah.
And that song kind of sums up how I felt about my first husband.
Wow.
Oh, boy. Marylee, you've had an incredible life. And we so appreciate you sharing your story with us. Like, this is, I get choked
I
up
do
pretty
too.
easily, but I definitely I like sit here with tears running down my face. But it's so beautiful. And so, wow, I guess all we can say is happy holidays to you and your family. I hope it's a beautiful one.
Thank you. Yeah. We're all going to Santa Cruz. Yeah. Rented a house that's as big as a city block in Santa Cruz.
That's awesome.
No, that's wonderful.
Yeah.
I mean,
We have a very inclusive family. And so there are now grandkids who are bringing their significant others, and everybody's in the kitchen making paella or brownies or stuff like that. And it's just a really great time.
yeah.
And thank you for sharing a timely story for us to put out before the holidays. We didn't know that was coming, but
Yeah.
it's a bonus.
Yeah.
Wow. Just a joy getting to meet you. And thank you for being so open, about your story. And not everybody would be able to do that, especially coming from the time period of shame,
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, but thank you, because hopefully it'll inspire some others to either listen and get a little bit of healing, or if they want to tell their own stories, all are welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. And it's great to meet you.
I do not know how we got through all that without completely losing it.
Yes, there were definitely moments where I was sitting here trying to keep it together.
That happens more than people probably realize. We get emotional during recordings a lot, and we usually leave that in because it's real.
Especially around the holidays. This time of year can bring up a lot. For me, one of the most difficult things is seeing photographs of my birth mother celebrating with my siblings and my nieces and nephews, seeing them together, seeing a life I'm not part of.
And that pain is very real. It doesn't go away just because you understand the circumstances or because a lot of time has passed.
But when it hurts, I try to hold on to stories like Marylee's, stories where the ending is not perfect, but it is loving, where the work gets done, where people show up for each other over time.
I called her a tough cookie, and honestly, she really is a tough Christmas cookie.
She reminds us that even after shame, secrecy, and loss, it is possible to build something meaningful, to create shared history, to make room at the table.
If you're listening to this during the holidays and feeling a little left out, unseen, or overwhelmed, you're not alone, and your story is not over.
Thank you, Marylee, for trusting us with your story. And thank you to everyone listening who carries these complicated feelings this time of year.
From our family to yours, however that family looks, we wish you peace, warmth, and moments of connection where you can find them.
Thanks for listening.
And remember, family secrets are the ultimate plot twist. The Family Twist podcast is presented by Savoir Faire Marketing Communications and produced by How the Cow Ate the Cabbage, LLC.